Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 200 of the Chronological Read Through the Bible. Today's reading, or rather my commentary, starts in Isaiah chapter 34, and I'm going to read just a little bit out of 35 as well. This is the point, really, of God pouring his judgment upon the earth. And we kind of already talked about this just a little bit. I told you that really the book of Isaiah breaks down in prophecy that was being fulfilled in the near future of the people who are hearing the words of Isaiah, and then a little bit further away, about uh, 700 years to the future, but then also that is speaking of the end of times. And a part of this in chapter 34, as you're reading through it, a part of what is being spoken of here is during the days of great tribulation. And it's also speaking of the beginning of the millennial reign. Now, I'm just going to tell you, when it comes to discussing the end of times, in particular the time of tribulation, the time of the millennial reign, commentators, pastors, theologians will be all over the place. And you will get many different viewpoints. You will get a compilation of different viewpoints, meaning just because one person looks at the tribulation one way, they may look at the millennial reign different. They may look at each one vice versa. So it's sort of this hodgepodge of how people view it. The way that I oftentimes look at it is to think of at the time of Isaiah writing the prophecies which will fulfill or which spoke of the Messiah's first coming, his birth and his ministry here on earth, as the great scholars looked at those writings, those prophecies of Isaiah, they really still missed them, didn't they? They did not really know how to apply them when the moment appeared before them. And that, again, is a part of how people missed the first coming of Christ, how they did not understand how the Lord was fulfilling the writings of Isaiah, partly because they were compiling together the the words of Isaiah covering not only Christ's first appearance as far as being born on earth, but they were also taking the millennial reign and putting all of that together. So I always say this to say we have the Holy Spirit, we do have that ability to discern, but in some ways also people are taking these prophecies and oftentimes not fully understanding them. We do have that ability through the Holy Spirit, but we need to let the Lord unfold the events in His time and always be leery of the person who starts giving a date and a time or even appointing certain individuals. It's one thing for us to have our eyes open, and the Lord does tell us that. We need to notice and recognize the times which we live in. We need to consider the signs of the time, and we clearly see, as I've pointed out, I've been pointing this out in sermons, but a little bit here as well, that we live in a time of the great darkness and deception growing. We live in that time that was spoken of, that people will become inventors of evil. That it's like they're recreating evil altogether. Not only are they participating in the evil deeds which were spoken of throughout scriptures, but it's like there's whole new things that are coming along. All the same root, all still turning away from the Lord, disobeying God. In these words, it says in chapter 34, verse 2, for the Lord's indignation is against all the nations, and his wrath against all their armies. He has utterly destroyed them. And again, this is speaking of the end of times. He has given them over to slaughter, so to slain will be thrown out, and their corpses will give off their stench, and their mountains will be drenched with their blood. This is very gory as you go through this section, but that's because it's laying out what those times are going to look like. It will not be pleasant. Again, when we really look at this time, there's going to be people that are all across the board on how they view the believer's interaction with that time period. without really going too deep into it, and I'm considering at some point doing a separate lesson on the end of times because it doesn't really fit with our scriptural read here, and I would like to do that at some point for you. But I will say this: remember when the children of Israel were slaves in Egypt, as the Lord poured the plagues upon the Egyptians, judging the Egyptian gods, that God still protected the Hebrew people while the Egyptians sat in their homes in complete darkness. It wasn't just darkness during the day that they experienced, but they experienced a very uh, mysterious darkness, and that their lamps would not even light their homes. But for the Hebrew people, the lamps in their home lit the inside of their house. So they weren't in that same darkness. Now, that doesn't mean that their lives were an easy life, because as the Egyptians suffered, they only put a greater burden of suffering upon the Hebrews. So that was a great persecution that came to them. The Egyptians' cattle died, the Hebrews' cattle did not die. So I'm only saying this because I want to give you hope in the end of times. It's not to say that that judgment will be all poured out upon you, but it's also not to say that times will go easy. I know right now there's going to be some that have a different viewpoint at the end of times and tribulation, and I've only like tipped my toe into it. Just hold on to what the scriptures say. Nevertheless, we have a great hope in him who is resurrected from the dead, who has sealed our faith. We have a great hope in the Messiah, Jesus. Brothers and sisters, as you go through these scriptures, there is the judgment, but there is also this great time of the millennial reign when Christ is there before the believers and reigning on the earth. And to me, I look at the millennial reign, those 1,000 years, as being that time of this is what it would have been like if people had just followed God. Now, we also still see there are those in the millennial reign that choose not to, but we see how God judges them and deals directly with them rather than it being how man necessarily dealt with that situation. Well, brother and sister, I do hope and pray that your day's going well. I hope to be a little bit more regular in the next couple of days or so with the videos. It's just in traveling kind of throws you a little bit. So till next time, God bless.